story and her business with us here in Black History Month.
She's a lead graphic designer at John Tyler Community College. So without further ado,
Hey everybody, thank you guys for having me today. So I just want to share a little bit about me and my career path, just to kind of talk a little bit about some of the choices that I made. So I just want to start and say I started at Hermitage High School here. I'm originally born and raised in Richmond. So yes, Paw Power and Panther Power. So I'm originally from Richmond, went to Hermitage High School. So back then, there was like the beginning of the internet. Everybody didn't even have computers. We were like the first class to get like Mac laptops in class. So that was a big thing back then. And I was one of those students that was like super extra with everything I did design-wise. So if I had a science fair project, it was very extra. If I had a birthday party, my birthday party flyer was very extra. I was really into computers like very early on. I had a really strong interest in that. So I had a guidance counselor. Her name was Mrs. Berry. And we had a conversation, and she asked me what I was interested in. And I told her I saw a movie, I wanted to do advertising, and that's pretty much all I knew. Told her I liked computers. And so she was the first person to kind of push me in the direction of where my career eventually headed. So she asked me if I had heard of UNC Chapel Hill. At the time, all I heard of was Michael Jordan played there and a couple other people. So I didn't know much about the school. So I did some research, found out that basically it was almost impossible to get in out of state. I had done pretty well academically in high school, but once I kind of decided that I was going to apply to UNC, I decided to kick up my activity. So in high school, I was president of the Spanish club. I don't really speak Spanish today, but I was president back then. I was in the Spanish National Honor Society, Beta Club. I was the captain of the step team. I basically was involved in every single club that I could possibly be involved in while I was in high school in order to make sure that my application was A1. So I got into UNC Chapel Hill. It was very costly coming from out of state, but I was excited to kind of start my trajectory into graphic design and advertising at the time. So when I got to UNC, they have a School of Journalism and Mass Communication there, and within that school, you can kind of pick your concentration. And so that's where I really kind of started to hone in on graphic design as my concentration area. So I learned how to use Adobe software, I built websites in Flash. Any of y'all know Flash? See, Flash is like super old now. We learned how to build websites in Dreamweaver. We learned how to do layout. I learned how to do everything from color theory. I learned art history. So that was really my foundation as a designer by going to UNC Chapel Hill. I had some internships while I was there. I will definitely say that internships were super important for me to get some like real world experience to kind of learn what expectations were in my role. So going to Chapel Hill proved to be a great choice for me, and it kind of put me on that trajectory to being a designer. So I will say that back when I started, graphic design wasn't necessarily a huge field. A lot of people kind of thought I was fixing computers and coding. People really didn't understand what branding meant and what graphic design meant. And it probably took about 10 years for people to kind of really jump on board to really understand like the value of that. So from from college at UNC Chapel Hill, I had my first job at VCU. Anybody going to VCU? Anybody interested? Okay. VCU has an amazing art program. I started as a graphic designer at VCU, and basically I did graphic design work there. I did all of the programs and stuff that if you are applying to school, you get your booklets, applications, all that stuff for VCU. And so at VCU, my first boss, why does everything keep sliding off the thing? Am I like moving it? Is that what y'all laughing at? All right, let me put my stuff up here. So basically at VCU was the first time I had a mentor. So what I would say is that in your career, I would say even if you have an inkling, even now, of something that you're interested in, I would say try to find somebody who's already in that field. Try to shadow them as early as possible to learn as much as you can about that career field. My first boss was the best boss I've ever had. She took me under her wing. She taught me everything that I really know about graphic design, how to do layout design, how to work in, I go to do press checks, work with printers. I know everything about colors, ink, paper. I learned that all in my very first job by having a mentor that ended up being my boss. So that was my first opportunity to really understand what graphic design was about and what the expectations were for my career. From there, I went to a company called Rico. I was the graphic designer for Altria. I did pretty much the same type of thing, but there I learned a different skill set. There was an in-house print studio, and I decided to learn how to run the print studio. And so from that job, what I learned was you have your regular job, the things that you do every day, but you always need to take the opportunity to learn another skill to make yourself more valuable. So from that job, I learned how to run a print department. So I can bind books, do printing, I can run a printing machine. I'm just gonna take this on. I know how to run a printing machine. I know how to do everything when it comes to printing from that job. And so that was my first opportunity to really say, let me push myself outside of design. I do photography, I do website development, I do printing. And so I try to figure out ways to make myself more valuable in my working environment so that I was an asset and people looked at me and said, we want to keep her, how can we make her comfortable in where she is? So that was my first time of kind of stepping outside of graphic design and kind of learning some other things. From there, I moved on to Northern Virginia. I was promoted in that role, and I ran a team of 4 graphic designers, 1 photographer in Northern Virginia for the Federal Deposit Insurance Company. That was very interesting, working for the federal government. It was my first time running a team, and from that experience, I would say I just learned the value of communication. The value of understanding that every single person is coming to work and having to bring, things that they're going through in their personal lives and trying to figure out ways to pour into designers that were younger than me. So at that point, I was becoming more of a mentor for the younger designers that I was managing. So I stayed there for a few years, and then I moved on to West Rock, which was called MWV. It's called West Rock now. I worked there in the communications department. So at West Rock, we have 42,000 employees, worked in the communications department. That was my first job where branding was a real thing. And social media had come out, and it was a big way of a lot of brands were starting to use social media as a platform to kind of advertise themselves and to promote and talk to consumers. That was also the first time that we started to understand the value of social media and also the detriment of social media. In that role, we learned that things can go viral, and that can make or break your business, but things can also go viral the negative way. And we had to be very careful in how we operated our account. So West Rock is a company that makes paper, packaging. You guys know, a mustard bottle, we made plastics. You know the mustard bottle that snaps to the back? Do y'all know what's Okay, so they invented that. They invented the Hershey's top, the one that pops up and you can kind of pour the syrup. So we did paper, packaging, and plastics there. However, when you're operating in that industry, number one, we're making paper, so that means that we are cutting down trees, right? So that means that there are going to be a lot of people around who are really interested in conserving and saving the planet. We're going to have a lot of things to say about what we do as a company. So we had to get ahead of that at that job and say, okay, what are going to be the concerns of our customers, and then how do we get ahead of that? We had to make sure that whatever we were putting on social media was checked, double-checked, and triple-checked to make sure there was no spelling errors, that we weren't misquoting somebody, because in this day and age, social media is so strong, people can get sued, lose their jobs, everything. So that was, I was there for 3 years. That was an amazing opportunity for me. It was a really great opportunity for me to learn more about branding for a large company, but also understanding the value of branding for myself as a person. So I realized that if our major company could have issues by posting something incorrect on social media, then what would happen if I posted something on social media? And so we had people that worked at our office who may have not thought about the value of social media, who may have posted things and they were connected to us as a company. If those things were negative, they would be fired. So that was the first time in that role where the value of social media was something that we used positively, but I also understood that it was like a double-sided thing. So from there, I ended up going to my current role, which I am currently the lead designer for John Tyler Community College in a very similar way to what I did when I first started out at VCU. At John Tyler right now, I design all of the external pieces. So anything that you see for Tyler, if it's ads on social media, if it's packets in the mail, if it's posters, if it's TV, reels, any of those things, I'm directly involved with designing that, t-shirts, promo. And from this role, I've kind of circled back to kind of do something I'm a little bit more passionate about by being able to kind of see an impact directly on the people that I'm designing for. So we have students who are coming to Tyler, they're changing their lives by coming to a community college, just figuring out who they want to be, and then going on to even work or going on to another college. So I've kind of come full circle when it comes to my full career. Outside of what I do every day, 9 to 5, I have a 5 to 9 job. I own my own business. I've owned my own design firm for 13 years. I do business on the side, and what I do is I design for businesses that I'm passionate about. So have any of you guys ever heard of RVA, how we call Richmond RVA? Okay, so RVA was a brand initiative that came about a couple of years ago, and when it was developed, the goal of it was to really rebrand Richmond. And when they rebranded Richmond, people in marginalized communities, that means people who are of color, African American folks like myself, felt like they were not included in the rebrand of Richmond. So what ended up happening was RVA was highlighting all of these new businesses and new opportunities and go to this hotel and come to this activity, but it wasn't highlighting those things for the African American community. So last year, Richmond Region Tourism got together and they decided to come up with Black RVA. And the goal of Black RVA is to highlight and uplift Black-owned businesses in Richmond. And my private company was contracted to design the logo, the video, the website, and manage all of the social media for the Black RVA initiative. And so I've been able to work in my passion full-time as a graphic designer, coming from higher ed, corporate environments, and kind of circling back. But all along, I've always tried to make sure that I was able to do something that I was passionate about. And so even though I had to do work and you go to your job every day and you do the best that you can do in your job, I always wanted to work with small businesses and different initiatives that meant more to me. And so having a side business has given me the opportunity to really focus on that. So I do work for Hope Pharmacy, Urban Hang Suite, so a lot of Black-owned businesses in Richmond. I'm working with a primary care doctor who's building a office in Manchester. So I get to work with people who are kind of following their dreams and their passions, and I'm helping them to take their ideas into something that's very tangible. So that's a little bit about me and my journey. I will say that for me, the few things that were really, really important along the way was, number one, taking the time to figure out what I wanted to do and not being hard on myself if I couldn't figure it out. I think a lot of times there's a lot of pressure to okay, you're about to graduate from high school, where are you gonna go to college? And then where are you gonna go work? And what are you gonna do? And so I would say try to give yourself some grace on that. Try to test out different things, expose yourself to different careers, talk to people who are in areas that are maybe outside of your norm or outside of what you know to get a little bit of background on how you can be successful. Don't be afraid to create your own lane. There are a lot of new jobs that are happening now because people have decided that there were new lanes that needed to be created. When I went to school, there was like graphic design and there was like PR. That was like, that's it. Today, we have like content creators, we have social media strategists, we have so many different roles that were created because young people decided to say, hey, I think that there's another opportunity besides what is already existing, and so I'm gonna push the envelope. So what I would definitely say is try to find, your lane, and if it isn't something that's already there, create it, because there's a lot of room for that. And especially in the roles that I'm in, we're creative environments. People are always looking for the next thing. You could be like, I'm a design stuff for TikTok. We at John Tyler haven't got on TikTok yet, right? So we need somebody to come in and say, how can we leverage TikTok for our students? How can we leverage Snapchat? How can we leverage Instagram? A lot of people that are older don't necessarily know about social media. You guys are the next generation coming up. So if that's something that's interesting to you, figure out how to make a career out of it because it is possible to do that. Number two, I would say, is get a mentor. Even if it's not necessarily in the field that you want, just talk to someone who has experience in an area that you're interested in. So if you want to get into teaching or higher ed, talk to someone who's an administrator, talk to somebody who's a principal, talk to somebody who's worked in the school, higher ed, talk to people who are in those environments so you can get an idea of how to navigate those spaces. And the third one is to figure out what your passion is. And even if your passion isn't in your job, always make time for that. Because I think we all get into the habits, like, we go to work, you work 9 to 5, we work 40 hours a week, but your work is not always your life. So if there are things that make you happy, things that you enjoy doing, if there are causes that are important to you, or organizations or people that you want to work with, make time for those things that really make you happy, and follow your dreams wherever those things may lead. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. So thanks, y'all. Does anybody have any questions? Mm-hmm.
What kind of struggles did you go through, coming up into did you struggle with anything in particular in graphic designing?
So I think one of the main struggles is being a Black woman as a graphic designer. When I got into it, I went to Carolina, so it's a predominantly white school, and there is a maybe 12% Black population there, but in my actual program, there wasn't a lot of people of color. And so I think sometimes it's kind of difficult to step into spaces when you're the only one, because it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And because graphic design, just like a lot of art, is kind of based on who you are. So at the core, you're kind of bringing out your perspective and your history and everything that you do, you're creating. So whatever you're kind of ingrained in who you are comes out into your art. And so sometimes it's hard to be in those spaces when you're the only one. For me, it was more so, okay, if I'm the only one today, that means that there are going to be a lot of other people that are going to be coming after me. So if I can be the only one and I can step into these spaces, I can kind of open the doors, expose people to someone they may not have worked with before. So I've been in environments where someone hasn't worked with a Black designer or even a woman designer. And so I've been the first person, so I've been able to kind of open their eyes to it, so they're more open to oh, maybe we need different perspectives. I guess you guys have seen blunders from major companies. I don't know if y'all saw the Dove ad when the person was taking off the shirt and it was a Black woman and a white woman. The whole the H&M when they had the little boy who had the little monkey on his shirt. So there have been a lot of issues that have happened with major companies that have kind of blundered, and then people in certain communities feel kind of outraged. Part of the reason why those things are happening is because they don't have enough people of color at the table to say, hey, this might not be the right way to go. Let's rethink this. Let's kind of come up with that. So even though I've kind of struggled with trying to find a mentor that looks like me. I've never had a mentor that looks like me. I'm a mentor now, but I've never had that. So I've kind of been in those spaces where I've been the only one a lot of times. But for me, I think it's just an exercise in kind of getting into those spaces, breaking down stereotypes so that I can be, opening doors for like the next generation of like young Black woman who wants to be a designer to feel comfortable to move. So, yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
Who was your biggest inspiration growing up?
Biggest inspiration growing up. So when I was in the 9th grade, my brother passed away. And it was unexpected. He had a heart problem, and it was an unexpected death. But for me, I try to take something that was a tragedy and turn it into something positive. So it's always been a motivating force for me to make sure that I am always living out my dreams, that I'm always going after the things that are important to me, that I'm always like living the best life that I can because I know that my brother isn't here. My company that I have is called Rhino Graphics. My brother's name is Ryan, and the company is spelled Ryano. So that's kind of like it's in homage to him. So that's probably my biggest inspiration. I'm always thinking about that in the choices I'm making. So like, would he be proud of the person I am today and the choices that I'm making? And, am I doing the right thing? Am I moving the right way? And of course, I have inspiration from outside sources. Like, I had a teacher that was the captain of our STEP team when we were in high school. Her name is Megan Wilson. She was kind of like the first person I ever had been exposed to who kind of taught me about like sisterhood. I stepped in high school. But I would say like those two people were kind of the foundation for me jumping off before I got my career started. So, yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
You said you went to Hermitage High School. Did you have the opportunity to be part of the technical centers that they have there? I don't know if the graphic design was there when you were there.
Yeah, back then it was not. I was not in the technical center. I was in that region, so that was just my school, my high school that was kind of like assigned. I did a couple of programs there. I think I took like not cosmetology, marketing, I think. It's so different now. Like they have such better programs than when I was there. Graphic design was definitely not a thing back then. I think the closest was coding. I took a coding class. I went in there one day and I was like, no, I will have to drop this class. I cannot do it. Coding is very different than graphic design. It's very back end. It's very like cerebral. Graphic design is problem solving in a different type of way because there is no finite solution. So if you tell me that you have a business and you need a logo, I'm making it up. So I like to be in more of like a creative space where I can kind of think that way. But back then, there were very limited programs for graphic design or advertising. So that's why it was a little bit difficult for me to figure out what my path was. So I'm very thankful for my guidance counselor who kind of pushed me into like, hey, look at, Carolina, they have this journalism school, because I really didn't have that much exposure to it in high school. So, yeah.
Where would you say that you get like your inspiration for your designs today?
So I would definitely say inspiration comes from a lot of places. When I walk around, I pay a lot of attention to like my surroundings. So when I'm talking to people, I look at their outfit, I look at how they sit, I look at the colors they wear, I look at buildings, I look at structures, I look at all kinds of things. So I'm really, I would say, inspired by like nature and my surroundings. But I also do follow designers online. I use Pinterest. I mean, I save things on there that inspire me that I think are beautiful. I learned about art history in undergrad, so I think going back and looking historically and how art was created and how it's really cyclical. So a lot of things that happened in the past, they die down for a while and then art comes back. Clothes come back. Like when I was in school, like we were wearing flare jeans and my mom was like, why are y'all doing that? Because we had bell bottoms, but like everything is cyclical and it kind of comes back around. So I'm watching things that happened in the past and looking at how people designed when there weren't any computers. And then looking at today and how like younger folks are creating different lanes that I don't even know about. And so I'm inspired by like pretty much anything. But I do say, like, as a designer, being up on trends is important. So I'm trying to always stay up on what the newest software is. I do social media as well, so I'm also looking at like what the new social media landscape is and how to like design for social media. So, yeah.
You said so you didn't have a graphic design class in high school. Are there anything you look back in high school, since we're talking with high schoolers, the lessons or skills that you learned during your time there at Hermitage that you draw on today? It could be things that were explicitly taught in class, or it could be other skills that were kind of periphery to what was happening in class. If you answered nothing, my feelings would be hurt a little bit.
I wouldn't necessarily say I learned a lot that helped necessarily with graphic design, but I will say that when I was at Hermitage, I was pushed to take advanced classes and AP classes, and I had teachers. I talk really fast, so I don't like to normally speak in front of people because I talk super fast. I was pushed by a teacher to read. We were all assigned poems to read, and then we had to explain the poems. And the teacher comes around and she gives everybody their poem, and then she comes to me and she's like, "You're really gonna have to work on this." And my poem was 2 pages long, so I had to memorize it and I had to speak it out loud. And so I was pushed by people who saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself. And so that kind of was like my jumping off point of like kind of taking over from them seeing that in me and then taking that and doing it myself. I think I was pushed to challenge myself beyond my own abilities. So maybe I was like, okay to qualify to take an honors class, but I was like, maybe I should take the AP class. And I wanted to be in a couple of clubs, but I was like, well, maybe I should be in more clubs. And so I pushed myself back then. And so when I got to college, I will definitely say that taking honors and AP classes helped me to not struggle when I got to college. So a lot of my friends were coming from high school to college. Some of them were from smaller towns. And I think a lot of people struggled with kind of getting adjusted. But I think because I was challenged really often in high school, it wasn't a difficult transition for me to go from like AP classes where we're writing like all these papers and expected to read a lot of pages overnight into, my first year classes as a freshman. It wasn't a really difficult transition for me. So I would say high school was more so a foundation to allow me to excel academically in college more than anything. And like I said, I think it seems like it's a long time ago. Like 2002 is when I graduated from high school. Graphic design like really was not a big thing. Even though it was around, it wasn't really, I mean, this is like when coding is starting to get like popular. So it really wasn't a big thing back then. So I think it was just those things that kind of helped me academically kind of push it there. Yeah.
What was your hardest client, I guess? Like, what were like some of the struggles? Like, you basically like you're one of your clients.
Clients. So clients are fun. Yeah.
Most, like, challenging client before?
So I will say, working with Black RVA, it wasn't necessarily a challenging client, so they weren't difficult. It was that we were talking about something that was difficult. So when you are creating something and you kind of know that there's going to be pushback, that's a harder thing to do because you have to always keep that in your mind. So when they say, oh, we're going to create this Black RVA thing, the first thing is like, why do you need it? And so we have to think about what are people's questions. Like, we already have RVA. Why isn't that enough? Why do we have to have Black RVA? And like, why isn't it a white RVA or an Asian RVA? Why, all these questions that people are gonna ask. And so that's a difficult task for me as a designer and a communications person, because when I'm designing something, I have to think about all of the positive and negative things that people are going to think or say, and then try to create something that can kind of combat that or to disarm people. So in creating this logo, it took a while. This is actually probably one of the simplest logos in appearance. It's actually one of the most difficult logos. So simple logos actually are harder, just even like curves, the letters are made up. So it's not a font. So this is actually, it looks super easy, but it's such like a convoluted experience on why we created it and what it means to other people. So that was probably a difficult client because we had so much weighing on our shoulders, so many expectations. I had people come to me like, why did you choose the colors that you chose? And I had to kind of defend those things. I had to talk about color theory. African American history is typically linked to red, black, green, gold. Those are kind of like how people typically say like African American things. Black RVA is coral, purple, gold, teal. That's the colors of the brand. And so I had to be ready to be able to explain those things. So when dealing with any topic that's heavy or a client that's difficult, the best thing you can do is be knowledgeable and be able to like defend your work. So having my background in graphic design allows me to talk about what colors mean to people, why I chose the colors, why we chose the font, why it's rounded on the ends of the letters versus it being sharp. All of these things are chosen very strategically, but it's a heavy thing that could be around like far after I'm gone. And so it was a very serious kind of stressful to design it. And so I would say that's probably one of the more difficult. I've had people who like don't like certain colors, or people who have something in their mind that they want. Like I have a logo in my mind and I'm like, I can't see in your mind. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to translate that. So sometimes it's difficult to take what's in someone's head and get them to be able to verbalize it and to come out and create something. So I think it's difficult in general just to take something that's not tangible and make it into something that's like very tangible. So, yeah.
How long did it take you to like come up with create the Black RVA logo?
So it normally takes about a month to do to create logos. So we do a whole development process where we do research, and so we look at the existing platform. If there's anything that's even remotely close, we want to make sure our logo doesn't look like that. So we look at like logos that are like local. We look at logos that are like within around the state. And then we talk to our clients. So a lot of it is information gathering. So we're asking questions like, what do you want this logo to do? How do you want people to feel when they see it? Where is it going to be put on? What things are going to be put on? How is it going to be used? And like the whole backstory that I was telling you about, the leaving out of Black folks, like that heaviness is a part of like this research as well. So what are people going to say? How do we get people who aren't Black to understand the value of it? So there's a lot of like process questions being asked. So I would say typically for a logo, it takes about a month. For a full brand, that means coming up with like colors, textures, submarks, other things that are supporting the brand, it probably takes about 2 months to do. So, yeah.
With stress, when you're stressed at your job, or what are some strategies that you use to kind of calm yourself down or get yourself focused? Or what are some outlets that you use?
I shop, I buy stuff. I just bought the new Jordans, the ones that just came out. I take a break. I think sometimes like life is going like so fast and we want to kind of like be ahead of it, and to the point that we're like burning ourselves out. And so for me, I'm such like an overachiever. Like I'm super hard on myself. I want to excel. But I think sometimes that is a source of stress. And so sometimes I have to like kind of like break it all the way down, and kind of like check myself, trusting number one that I'm going to do what I said I want to do, but giving myself some space to just be. So I watch trash TV. I surf the internet. I get caught in, rabbit holes on Instagram. And like next thing you know, I'm looking at like a puppy that's like doing tricks, and I'm like, how did I even get here? But those things kind of help me to like take a break, because sometimes life can be super stressful. And so I try not to take myself like too serious. So I try to have fun. I try to laugh. And at the end of the day, I'm gonna still do the things that are important to me. But I think it's important to really take time to yourself and to like give yourself a break and rest and reset, and not be so on like all the time. So, yeah.
What are some hardships that you face as a colored person in high school?
In high school, it was interesting. As I told you guys before, I was in a lot of advanced classes, and in most of those classes, there were not a lot of students of color. And so that was really difficult when a lot of my friends were like in their classes and they're having fun or talking about all their experiences, and I'm like, yeah, it's just like me and like one other person. And I think that even in some spaces, I think I had some difficulty with even like teachers having a little bit of bias toward me as a student. I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding when you have students who are of color and they excel as if someone's like giving them kind of like a push up or they're getting some extra help. And so I think for me in high school, some of those classes were difficult. I had difficult conversations that I had to have with teachers. I had an advocate in my mother who basically had taught in higher ed and taught in high school. And so she always encouraged me to speak up for myself. And so in those spaces where I felt like I was misunderstood or I wasn't being treated fairly, I would never allow that to just be. And I always spoke up for myself, and I always addressed things instead of like hovering it and keeping it to myself. And so that kind of taught me to be the person I am today. So I'm an advocate today for myself and for anybody else that I feel like needs an advocate. And so I think it started there. I think when you are a student who is gifted and you're in those spaces, it's kind of hard because you're kind of like, I guess you're kind of dealing with double consciousness or duality very young of like maybe your friends you can be who you want to be with your friends and you can be yourself, but when you go to certain spaces, maybe you can't show up that way. And so I began to try to work on trying to show up myself and be able to be very present. And if I felt that I was being mistreated or there was something wrong, I would address it. And, it didn't always change people, but it changed me. So being able to speak up allowed me more confidence and allowed me to be more of myself authentically, even if it didn't necessarily change someone else. So. Mm-hmm. Oh, you have a question?
With your teachers and with your peers, like, how did you balance kind of explaining your race to them and also like oftentimes kids of color, we have to like be the representatives for our race. So how did you like balance that?
So I will say when I was in high school, I felt like it was a different period of time, so people didn't talk about race as much. It was kind of just like swept under the rug. I would say today, it's a sensitive thing, and I think sometimes it's hard because people do kind of expect you to be the representative of your race. Like they want to ask you questions, they want to know your perspective. But I think it's really an opportunity for you to change someone else's perspective. And unfortunately, a lot of onus lies on people of color to often be the explainer. But we can't be the people who actually change it because we are still marginalized, but we can be the person that is educating someone about it. And after you educate somebody, it's up to them to then take the next steps in order to change. And we're talking about from like general person-to-person change and then all the way up to systematic changes, right? So you're talking to someone person to person, that's just one person. But I think it's one of those, I think you have to kind of think of it like, if I'm talking to one person here and they're asking me a question, even though it gets exhausting to have to say over and over the same thing, sometimes you're able to say one thing that can change the trajectory of somebody else's life. So that one thing you could say could go to this person right here who never saw something in that way. And then that person then says, let me talk to my parents, right? Because a lot of the things that we learn, a lot of the biases come from our home. Now people are saying like, okay, let me have a conversation with my mom or my dad, and let me tell you about what I learned from somebody that I didn't know. And then you talk to them and you can expose them to different things. So, I know it's stressful to feel like you always have to be, and I think that you can say no. Sometimes if you're just If you don't want to do it, just say no. Just be like, I'm not into the space right now. I don't want to do it. You have to focus on yourself. You have to protect yourself, protect your mental health. But also understand that I think change definitely starts like at a much smaller space than people think. I think people are trying to like create like amazing change and like, let's get a new president, let's do this, that's that. I mean, that's huge levels. But I think change starts like person to person. And so if you're able to expose somebody to something that maybe they didn't know and that can change how they look at you or other peers, then maybe that'll be a chain reaction that'll start from here that we can create, larger change from it. So, I mean, it doesn't stop. I will say that I talk about race very often. I am the communications chair for our Diversity and Inclusion Council at John Tyler. Sometimes, I don't want to talk about it, but people want to know. I mean, because back then when I was in school, nobody wanted to know. Nobody wanted to talk about it. It wasn't a thing. So being in the space that you're in now, when people want to know, at least that's like them taking like a step forward. So you can kind of meet them there when you're able to, and maybe that'll create, some domino effect that could change on a small scale.
Does anyone have a takeaway? Like, what are some things you guys learned today? We're wrapping it up. The bell's about to ring, but what are some things that you learned so she can know what a great job she did, but she can hear it from me, but she'd rather hear it from you guys. What are some things that you will remember from today? Thank you.
I don't understand. When you said change starts with person to person, like I've never heard that before. So it's a really cool aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people change has to be like,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta make it.
Yeah.
That is true.
So I'm
Yeah.
just going to repeat that the change going from person to person, just making that one connection can mean so much. That was a great takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have? You had to have gotten, yes, ma'am.
That you can, like, whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve it, like, no matter what other people say.
Okay, good. Jane?
The whole like, if you're interested in like a job or something, like to get a mentor and like to like be or surround yourself around like people like that. You don't usually like hear that often, so I thought that was really right.
And yesterday's speaker said the same thing. You have that one person. The mentor doesn't need to be somebody older. It can just be that person who keeps you in check, right? As that person who keeps you on the right path. That was excellent. Any other takeaways?
When you said something about taking a break and like focusing on your mental health, because that's also very important. You don't want to work yourself too much and stress out.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Focus on your mental health. I didn't know if you heard that, but take a break sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
I just have a question. So you were talking about how you don't feel like there's enough African Americans at the table of like
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of the reason why you decided to go into that field? Is to have that voice in there?
So I think at the beginning, it wasn't. I was just like, I like computers and I like design and I like thinking. Over the years, I kind of started with just like being a designer. So that was just like creating things I thought were beautiful. From there, I learned that there's so much more to just creating things. So I've moved from just being a designer to being like a visual strategist, and I really operate in branding. And branding is really about understanding like people and audiences. And so it's taking beautiful things and making sure that it connects. So like people can create amazing graphic design logos or whatever. If people don't understand it and they don't connect to it, then it's like kind of pointless. So what happens with a lot of these major brands, and what I've learned as I've kind of moved into branding spaces, is that they create amazing products, but it's not reaching their customer. They don't understand how their customer thinks. So even though they're creating these things that kind of don't work, like why would you put this on a shirt? Having somebody at the table gives them another perspective into an audience that maybe they don't know. Because African Americans are some of the largest consumers of like clothing, art, music. We're like mass consumers. But if we are the consumers and the people that are creating it don't look like us, there's a disconnect. And so what's gonna happen is a lot of times brands are gonna miss, they're gonna make mistakes because they don't quite understand their audience. And so what I've moved from was just being a designer to someone who is designing for the audience and trying to understand like what are my concerns of my audience and what are they thinking about and what are what are things that they are looking forward to, what are they worried about, like all of those things come into play. And so for me, I've kind of transitioned from just being a layout designer and creating all of that to like now looking at branding as a whole thing. Chick-fil-A has like one of the best brands, right? Because they have the best customer service, not because it's not the food, it's like the really good customer service. So it's linking those things together.
It's definitely the communication and getting to know each other, right? That's all.
Thank you guys.